So beyond a token, how can Web3 protocols and companies build competitive moats that help them capture part of the value they're creating? Below is a 5-power framework on moats that Web3 projects can utilize beyond tokens. Hello, and welcome back to Ethereum Audible, Ethereum in Depth. I'm Yehoshua Zlotogorski, and this is where we read all kinds of stuff weird and interesting from the Ethereum's Web3 general ecosystem. And the markets have been going down. This is not the podcast where I'm going to be covering the markets, but inspired by the house of cards that's been falling down over the past month. Leverage upon leverage, bad tokenomics upon bad tokenomics, I was inspired to go down the rabbit hole of a few different topics on Web3 and crypto in general, and not, go down the rabbit holes and think about them for the first time, but try to put them into clear and concise writing for the first time in a while. And today I actually want to read one of those blog posts that yours truly just put out. It's called How to Build a Moat in Web3. And the reason for writing it was because as I was watching this house of cards topple down, it just struck me how badly designed so many projects had done with their tokenomics. And that was a bad sentence, but basically, what a bad job a lot of projects have done with their token economics and have misjudged the reason for using token economics and when they make sense and when they don't make sense. And a lot of projects use them as purely as a customer acquisition cost and paying users to use their protocol, their game, their DeFi project, whatever it is. And that's just not the right way to think about it. And they think about it in the way that this is what will help them build a moat for their project and prevent users from going elsewhere. At the end of the day, that's customer acquisition, retention. They're bundled into one in Web3 for a lot of these tokenomics. And that's just the wrong way to think about token economics. And one of the reasons why we've seen a massive run-up and massive downfall is because of this badly used mechanic. And so I wanted to put down into writing what are the parts of a Web3 project that actually constitute a moat, that constitute a defensible strategy, especially in a world where we're trying to build things that are open, that have permissionless innovation, and can be forked. Because being forkable is a key component of building in Web3. So that's what inspired this post. It's called How to Build a Moat in Web3. And we're going to get into that in just a moment. And this topics of the use cases for crypto, when to use a token, why crypto in general, these are topics that I think we're going to be focusing on over the next few weeks, if only to remind ourselves during the bear market of why this makes sense, but also to build stronger foundations for the future. And hopefully, if you're listening to this, you care about building in Web3 and in crypto. And these principles will help kind of inspire and guide you towards what you're building so that we actually build things that have real use cases, that have real purpose, that solve real customer problems, and are well thought through. And as always, before diving in, I want to give a shout out to Alpe Audio, ALPE audio.com, or the app, mobile app. You can search it in iOS or the Google Play Store. And what Alpe Audio is, it's your go-to resource for on-the-go learning. If you don't have time to learn product management or how to build an audience or what the basics of venture capital are or how to structure your day properly or even how to be mindful, well, Alpe Audio has an in-depth audio course that's built for on-the-go learning all around your smartphone. So you can just listen, tap play, put the phone in your pocket, and have that knowledge transmitted directly to your brain in a way that you will remember it later and be able to apply it in your life. Every course is really, really well thought through and produced. So I highly encourage you to head over and give it a try. There's a link in the episode resources, and if not, it's just A-L-P-E audio, Alpe audio. So with that, let's dive into How to Build a Moat in Web3 by Yehoshua Zlotogorski. The playbook for competitive moats for traditional companies has already been written. Hamilton Helmer's 7 Powers has emerged to be a popular favorite, but other frameworks abound. And Hamilton Helmer's 7 Powers framework are 1. Scale economies, 2. Network economies, 3. Counter positioning, 4. Switching costs, 5. Branding, 6. Cornered resources, and 7. Process power. When you're building in Web3, you're hopefully buying into the Web3 ethos: open, permissionless innovation, and avoiding user lock-in. You're building knowing full well that anyone can fork your code, copy and paste it, and even vampire attack your users. Not all of the 7 powers work in Web3. So which powers do work in Web3? How do you build a competitive moat? How can you make sure that the problems that have plagued incentivizing open source and public goods funding doesn't afflict you? When token. Tokens have been a popular choice, offering an economic incentive to contribute, build, and stick to a specific platform. Mark Andreessen has said it outright that tokens add an economic layer to web protocols. Unfortunately, we've seen tokens fail time and time again. Apparently, using purely economic incentives for behavioral change is harder than it seems, for reasons I'll discuss elsewhere. So beyond a token, how can Web3 protocols and companies build competitive moats that help them capture part of the value they're creating? Below is a 5-power framework on moats that Web3 projects can utilize beyond tokens. I'll explore each one and use Uni-Swap as an example for each of the 5 powers. These aren't unique to Web3 companies, but each has unique aspects in implementation for Web3 projects versus Web2 companies. And just for the record, when I use Uniswap henceforth, it's uniswap.com and uniswap.org, both interchangeably. Essentially, the smart contract, the Uniswap protocol. I hope this framework will help entrepreneurs evaluate their projects' moats and long-term viability, and encourage the disuse of tokens when they're not needed. The 5 powers are 1. Brand, 2. Economies of scale, 3. Network effects, 4. A viral go-to-market, and 5. A non-extractive mindset. Let's go through the 5-power framework for Web3 moats. 1. Brand. Brand in Web3 is critical. Despite being a trustless system, the reality is that Web3 is the Wild West. New projects are launched each day. Some are real, some are stupid, some are well-intentioned but faulty, and some are outright scams. It's impossible to sift through the noise, especially when to really understand and verify a protocol you have to go layers deep. For example, you could dive deep into Aave, a trusted protocol, verify everything about it, including the sources of liquidity, the code, and the team, and still miss that they rely on Chainlink's Oracle for their only price feed, and Chainlink's feeds are controlled by one 4x9 multisig. Your entire due diligence is useless without understanding that one fault. And this is a good case. We're a well-trusted brand. Most people don't have the time or ability to dive into protocols and the smart contract details and rely on brand. This is why trust in Web3 is so critical. The Lindy effect, which states that the longer something survives, the greater its chances are of continuing to survive, has never been more true than in Web3. The longer a project is out there and hasn't suffered a breach, a hack, or a scam, the more trustworthy it is. In Web 2, you might be tempted to try the newcomer. In Web 3, you don't mess around. You go for the blue chips or risk losing your funds. Brand matters in a world that's built on trust, where trust and legitimacy is a scarce asset. And that's a post that Vitalik has actually written about how legitimacy is the most important scarce resource in Web 3. While in Web 2, being first to market can mean releasing a glitchy MVP and seeing a fast follower catch up, in Web 3 it means earning trust, especially when you're the team inventing a new protocol design. It means that your brand is what recognized with innovation, that you've had the most time to build, test, and iterate, and have the deepest understanding in the space. All of these build trust. Let's go to the Uni-Swap example. While many DEXs have forked the original Uni-Swap contract, Uniswap's brand is still by far the most trusted and well-known DEX brand out there. More tokens are swapped on Uniswap than any other competitor DEX. Despite having been forked and vampire attacked, the ecosystem knows that the Uniswap team are the OGs. They're the original innovators and the first to market with new innovations. They've built up and earned trust. Builder questions. These are for you to think about. Will my brand be recognized with my project? Is what I'm building a project where trust matters? 2. Economies of scale and flywheels. Throughout the 20th century, economies of scale were a major moat. In the Web2 SaaS world, it's been left along the wayside. It matters far less to a B2B SaaS built on AWS how many clients it services. Although, for the record, for businesses like AWS, economies of scale matter quite a lot. Web3 protocols can be far more similar to AWS than your classic B2B SaaS. One of the key features of Web3 is tokenization and bringing liquidity to where there previously was none. And liquidity follows economies of scale. The more liquidity you have, the easier it is to get more liquidity, and the easier it is to build other products on top. It's not a classic network effect, as nodes in the network don't necessarily gain a benefit the more nodes join. So, the Uni-Swap example. Uniswap's liquidity pools benefit from economies of scale. Liquidity begets more liquidity, and they can offer deeper liquidity in their pools and therefore lower slippage costs than any other DEX, which in turn causes more users to swap on Uniswap. Builder questions. What economies of scale can I offer? What product or service uniquely benefits from being an early mover in this space? 3. Network effects. Network effects are always tricky, both in Web 2 and Web 3. If you can achieve them, it's a huge competitive moat, especially for an early mover. Web 3 network effects aren't very dissimilar to Web 2 ones. You first have to understand who or what are the nodes in your network, and based on that, work to incentivize those nodes to join. Remember, the definition of a network effect is that the value of the network grows with each additional node, like a telephone network. Many companies confuse economies of scale or flywheels with network effects. Does Web3 lend itself better to network effects? I'm not convinced. Web3 is all about ownership, and ownership and social networks, or network effects, don't necessarily go together. There's also an anti-network effect at the blockchain level, where more demand, i.e. nodes on the network, actually drive up congestion and prices in the form of gas fees. You have to carefully examine your product and natural node to see if there is a network effect. The Uni-Swap example. Uniswap's core node is a liquidity pool. The more pools, the more utility one gains from using Uniswap as a whole. If there was only an ETH to USDC pool, there wouldn't be much utility. Each additional liquidity pool, like USDC to DAI or DAI to wrapped BTC, adds utility to the network as a whole, and to each new user. Be aware that after covering the top, let's say, 30% of liquidity pools, adding new nodes has a declining marginal benefit. Builder questions. What are the nodes in my network that gain value the more nodes join my network? Is there a way I can leverage these nodes for my go-to-market? At what point does my network effect taper off? 4. Viral go-to-market. Some of the best Web3 use cases lend themselves naturally to a viral go-to-market, which is an incredibly powerful moat. These use cases tend to be utilities, as in foundational building blocks of the Web3 ecosystem. These are building blocks like Web3's Legos that other protocols use in what they're building, and they drive users to your protocol. Utilities can be DeFi primitives, oracles, or even game elements. It's essentially a viral B2B2C go-to-market. The Uni-Swap example. Uni-Swap enables other protocols to add liquidity to their projects, and the easiest way to do that is by creating liquidity pools with Uni-Swap. By building a utility for other Web3 projects, those projects then send their users back to Uni-Swap. Naturally, the more projects integrate Uni-Swap, the more the brand, economies of scale, and network effects come into play. This is where permissionless innovation shines through, and Web3 gives monetization options to things in Web 2 that didn't have any. Open source libraries are just as critical building blocks in Web 2, but they don't benefit from the same market forces that Web3 enable. Builder questions. Is what you're building a utility? Will other projects integrate what you're building and thus drive more nodes to your network? 5. A non-extractive mindset. While the first 4 elements of this framework exist in Web 2, this last one is uniquely Web 3. Web 2 companies achieve customer lock-in through non-portable data, closed software, and organizational practices. Not that these are necessarily bad, just different. In Web 3, that's not the case, and anyone can either leave your protocol or worse, fork it and compete, with the added benefit of having a complete list of all of your users and early adopters. The only way to avoid forks and vampire attacks that compete directly with what you're building is by adopting a non-extractive mindset. If you're extracting unneeded rent, there's room for a fork that will compete those margins away. By adopting the Bezos mindset of your margin is my opportunity, and assuming from the get-go a low-margin protocol, you're avoiding future forks and competition, and increasing your moat. The Uni-Swap example. Uniswap's swap fee is incredibly low. So low that it's borderline worthwhile to be a liquidity provider. There's not much room for Uniswap's take rate. Had Uniswap's fee been much higher, the incentive to fork and implement a lower fee fork would have been high, and Uniswap's margin would have been cut. Builder questions. What's the lowest extractive fee you can set that maintains your business but prevents forks? Who can fork your project, and how? Why will they fork your project? So, if you're wondering how to build a moat in Web3, this 5-power framework offers a way to think about it, looking at your project through the lenses of brand, economies of scale, network effects, a viral go-to-market, and a non-extractive mindset. Each one has a unique way to shine in Web3 projects that doesn't exist in traditional businesses. Leverage those differences. So that's a wrap-up of the article. I think the key underlying thread that maybe I should have made more explicit is that there are attributes to a Web3 project that are different from a Web2 project. And just simply copy-pasting Web2 to Web3 isn't smart and won't work. There are unique reasons to build on Web3 and unique reasons not to build on Web3. Not every project makes sense to be decentralized and distributed and focused on trust at the cost of UI and the benefits of centralization. And so when you're thinking about building in Web3, think very carefully about why you've chosen to build in crypto. What are the advantages that crypto bring to your project? And then how does that play out in what you're building? And this project lets you think about it in more of a business sense of how to create that moat so that there's actually value in what you're building. I think one of the problems in Web3, at least to my mind, is that a lot of the projects that lend themselves naturally to being built on Web3 are trustless, they're protocols, and by being protocols and having a non-extractive mindset, they don't capture a lot of value, which means that you're not as incentivized to build on them. And the reason you can't capture a lot of value is for what I just said, which is if you capture too much value, someone will fork it. And the goal of a protocol is just to be there and to provide value without being so extractive. Like HTTP, SMTP, they provide value each and every day, and they don't extract any value. Uniswap is a great example of how you can do this in Web3 and still extract some value. But the thing is, Uniswap is uniquely suited to Web3 because it ticks all of these 5 boxes, and that's what makes it so successful. And only projects like that can succeed massively and still be non-extractive on a lower level. And by the way, a 0.3% fee in TradFi can still be really, really high when you're trading large amounts. If you exchange currencies, that's going to, at a massive scale, at a hedge fund scale, that will be way too much slippage and a much too high fee. And so even there are downsides to it. I mean, for me personally at the bank, when I trade, foreign exchange, 0.3% fee is great. So it's all a question of what you're building. But the point is that Uniswap is suited uniquely for web3. It ticks all those 5 boxes, and there's so many projects that don't because they're just trying to copy and paste web2 primitives into web3, and that's not the way to go about building. You have to think about, is what I'm building uniquely web3? Does it suit itself? Is it suitable for web3? Does it make sense to be building it in crypto? And if yes, then you can start and kind of look at it through these 5 lenses that I've offered. And my real hope is that the more people focus on how to build a moat without tokens and start to realize why they should use tokens, and not just as a funding mechanism and not just as a security in their project, will have less tokens to sift through, less noise for retail and for us, honestly, to follow in the bull and bear phases. Because it's such an attention sapping mechanism, also in the bull, also in the bear. And we have to get smarter with how we build. I think one thing that definitely taking away from in the bear market here that we're going through is just how much schadenfreude there is out there at the crypto community. And in a lot of ways, that's our fault. That's our fault for being snide. That's our fault for being, for not shutting up voices that, say, stay poor. It's our fault for not calling out more projects that look weird to us, that we think don't have good structure designs. And it doesn't have to be calling out in this project should die and it's a shitcoin, because I hate that as well. But it's just more of like, let's give a real, well-reasoned analysis of why this doesn't work out, or what the risks are to it not working out. And I'm also going to be trying and doing that more here on the podcast and also in my writings. And that's one of the goals for doing the read-throughs of different vectors of attack on Ethereum and proof of stake Ethereum. I think it's super important for all of us as people who believe in Bitcoin and Ethereum and Web3 in general to be aware of those attack vectors, and also to spread the word so that you know your risks. People who are buying in, who are staking, who are whatever they're doing, they know the risks associated with this crazy but amazing, so fascinating market space. So hope you enjoyed this read through and this article. As always, love to hear thoughts, feedback, comments. I'm at YehoshZL on Twitter, or at Ethereum Audible on Twitter. And this Friday, we will have a blockchain bite coming out about inflation, because some of the recent talk about inflation has just gotten me all angry. Have a great one.